We're already at the end of March and I have played a lot during that time. Here are the JRPGs I have played so far. And starting off 2025 for me was a game I finished just after my top 15 list was done for 2024. But if I had completed it in time, it would be on that list. Fantasian Neo Dimension played on PC and it took me 50 hours to finish. It's centered around the protagonist Leo, who has infiltrated a mecha-centric world. Following an explosion, he loses his memories and is flung back to the world of humans. The human world is slowly degrading from a phenomenon known as Mecteria. Leo sets out with others to regain his lost memories and save the world too, I guess. This is one of the weirdest experiences I've had, and I went against my often stone-set condition to do so, and that is a personal rule of mine when playing a game. If a game isn't doing anything for me within 10 hours, I abandon it, and that is exactly what Fantasian was doing. In fact, the first 15 hours I was bored with it, because everything just felt shallow. The combat, for instance, it's turn-based and basically all your attacking abilities are ranged. You'll often be fighting hordes of enemies and you need to weave your attacks around the field till you take them all out. Other than that though, your abilities are standard fare for a turn-based JRPG. Heals, buffs, debuffs, everything you expect is there. No surprises to be found. Granted, Fantasian does have a neat mechanic to make random encounters less of an issue. As you walk around, you can turn on the Dimension device, which stacks encounters to a max of 30, and this can be extended later on to 50 through side content. When it overflows, you take out all of the encounters at once. It can get a bit tedious later on because these resulting fights can take a while, but it ensures you're getting good experience gains when enemies are of a similar level to you and not being hampered by said encounters while you're exploring. Exploration too, that's inoffensive for the early stages. One thing you'll notice immediately is the art style that makes up the environments. Mistwalker used a bunch of handmade dioramas to bring the world to life, and my word, it looks beautiful. One of the more novel art directions I've seen, and they made it work. There's a staggering amount of detail in some of these worlds and it feels like you're going through a painting or mural all its own. And it was clear that Mistwalker wanted you to see all of it because the camera will spin around like a teacup ride. The real issue with this is that your controller doesn't calibrate when the screen shifts. So for instance, if you're pressing forward and the screen rolls to the right, holding forwards on the control stick causes you to go left. Look here, I have to actively stop whenever the screen moves just to allow my controller to recalibrate itself. That's an annoyance, but minor considering the beauty of the world, I guess. The OST by Uematsu, pretty good. Not his best work, I'll say, but the environmental scores in particular are definitely derivative of his earlier songs. Though if the battle themes aren't doing anything for you, you can switch it over to a number of other Final Fantasy based titles, though I would have liked a wider selection if possible. A lot of the choices are based on the more modern entries like Final Fantasy 14 and 16, it would be nice to have stuff there from 9 for example. And that's the thing, for the initial hours of Fantasian it's fine, it's very linear at first, the story plods along and you're taking out relatively simple bosses. But for me, it might have been a little bit too simple. The game up till the 10-hour mark didn't really require me to strategize. And that's fine, RPGs do generally start easier, but I would have liked a little more challenge, because it soon culminated in me feeling uninspired. The game was doing very little to keep me engaged. The gameplay wasn't deep enough, the story was bland all said and done, and the music was just a little below what I expect from Uematsu, so yeah, I was on the verge of dropping it. But after talking to a few friends who said they had finished it themselves and enjoyed it, it gave me an indirect nudge to give it 5 more hours, and that decision was rewarded. Come a certain point, everything just clicked for Fantasian Neo Dimension. The game became notably harder, the skill trees opened up, you were able to freely explore the world, and there was a massive amount of side content to partake in. From here, it all started to make sense, it all became clear to me. Fantasian was always a great game, it just needed time to bake. And that was even considering the difficulty. It is a tough game, and maybe even unfair at times. Look, difficulty is fine, I like a challenge, but it also has to be a fair challenge. So for instance, if I fight a boss and die once to learn its mechanics and what equipment to use, fine, I'm cool with that, that's the Dark Souls mentality kicking in. The boss may use Petrify or Curse, so equip the necessary gems, maybe it's weak to lightning, so find ways to boost that elemental damage. This kind of difficulty is fine to me, and Fantasian in most cases doesn't overstep its mark. Saying that, there are moments where it does do that, and this is where I draw the line. If you go into a fight and you need a specific ability that you don't have, that's where I draw the line. The thing with Fantasian is that you don't learn abilities via leveling. You learn them through your skill tree, which is all about player choice. But when the game requires you to pick a certain ability in that skill tree, often leading you to invest precious points in a branch you may not even want to go down, that's going too far. That's the illusion of choice. If you learn the skills naturally through leveling, and the ability is just there in your kit when the boss fight occurs, that's fine. The solution is there, you just need to use it. When you need to literally pick a specific skill from a large tree that is all about choice, that is too much. And Fantasian had a couple of those fights. There was one side quest with Ez, I remember, which required a very niche ability which up till then, 40 hours in, I had never even used it. I didn't even have it learned. So I was forced to lose and respec. Thankfully, Fantasian makes respecking easy, you just press X and reallocate your points. Still, it skirts the line. And I'm sure what doesn't help is that some of the bosses are just brutal, even if you have all the equipment and skills you require. I resigned myself to dying on pretty much every late game boss just to figure out what I needed to equip and what it did. Some of the fights, especially the final one, are so tight in terms of balancing buffs, choosing when to use your ultimate ability. It can get rough, and I feel sorry for anyone who played the original Apple Arcade version for this reason. Neo Dimension's hard difficulty was the normal difficulty before it came to console. I can't imagine playing on that setting by default. I was content with normal in the second part of the game, that's for sure. It was challenging, and it was frustrating at times, but like I say, Fantasian clicked from this point on. That is where I latched onto the game. I couldn't stop for my remaining hours. Granted, it was the gameplay and exploration that kept me going because the story remains pretty bland. The characters are fine, I guess, but the narrative is as uninspired as it gets. You don't play Fantasian for the story, which is saying a lot for how much I liked the gameplay, because story will always be king for my tastes. Overall, a great game. A little overtuned here and there in regards to bosses, it takes a while to get going and the story is a nothing burger, but at its core, Fantasian's a great game. And anyone who grew up with games like Final Fantasy 9 or 10, I think will find plenty to enjoy here. The second I played was Romancing Saga 2 Revenge of the Seven, played on PC, and it took me 42 hours to finish. I did a full video for this game, check it out if you'll want. Commentary here will be brief and it's basically just to tell you that the game is amazing and it is going in my top 5 come the end of the year. I've no doubts about that and I'll make sure that it doesn't get buried by recency bias. It took me about 5 days to finish the game. I was completely hooked on it. The gameplay is superb in terms of depth and customization, the world is vast, and what made it stand out more than any other game is how much importance is placed on the choices of the player. This is a game where your choices matter all the way till the end of your playthrough. And the truly excellent thing here is that the remake has made that premise approachable. It's got obtuse design here and there and hidden mechanics, but overall it is a game that in the majority you will not feel lost while playing, which is one of the most common criticisms often levied at the Saga franchise. This is a game I sadly did not have time for in 2024, but I think I saved the best till last from my final stash of installed games. It's a must-buy for any JRPG fan. The third game I played was Atelier Iris Eternal Mana, the PS2 version that was emulated, and it took me 32 hours to finish. I've done a full video on this game and its sequel, so check that out if you want a full rundown. Here, it's a TLDR. It's a fairly good game with decent combat and a great OST, though it is a little bit too easy. It has some clear flaws like a lack of world map and a cap of 9 on all items, even the most common ingredients, and for me, it's not what I look for in the Atelier series with its focus shifted away from crafting. The fourth game I played was Atelier Iris 2, the Azov of Destiny, PS2 emulated, and it took me 30 hours to finish. Brilliant game, much improved from the first. Still takes on the traditional JRPG approach but has a dual protag feature, so the crafting also has greater importance. The two lead characters in Felt and Vyse are great, the music rules once again, and the combats had some welcome additions like a timeline to see turn order and the break mechanic for added strategy. If a game of this style came out in the present for Atelier, I think it would do well. The fifth game I played was Atelier Iris 3 Grand Phantasm, PS2 emulated, and it took me 36 hours to finish. Easily my least favourite of the Iris trilogy, has no comparison to the first two games in terms of story or characters, and pretty much became a testing ground for the first Manakemia. The two leads in Iris and Edge are the worst the sub-series has to offer in terms of relatability and depth, the exploration is held back because of the time limit, the insistence on platforming isn't welcome, and the story ends on a whimper. The only real positives here are the combat and the use of the blades, which are effectively job changes, along with its banging OST. But other than that, it never goes beyond an alright game. The sixth game I played was Manakemia Alchemists of Al-Revis, PS2 emulated, and it took me 38 hours to finish. Despite following a game as flawed as Iris 3 and adopting a similar style, Manakemia was brilliant. The foundation was hugely improved for this game in the majority, though it still had problems with backtracking and a loose time limit tied to a day-night cycle. Manakemia exceeded in its combat, crafting, music, and its social sim aspects though. Every character in Manakemia was a joy, and they only got better with the side events that are tied to them. There was very little to dislike about this game. The seventh game I played was Manakemia 2 Fall of Alchemy, PS2 emulated, and it took me 49 hours to finish. A sequel to Manakemia 1 in more ways than one, because it has the same structure to its gameplay, the same combat, the same character progression. It's pretty much a carbon copy outside of its dual protag feature that requires 2 playthroughs in order to see the true ending. Maybe a lack of innovation, but I liked the gameplay from the first game, so I feel the same here. The real issue for Manakemia 2 is its story and characters, both of which are nowhere close to the original. It's a good game, but I prefer the first. The eighth game I played was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, played on PC, and it took 76 hours to finish. Man oh man was I looking forward to Rebirth. It was one of my most anticipated games for 2025, and it didn't disappoint in many respects. Though in the same breath it did have problems too, which we'll delve into in time, but if I were to quantify the positive to negative, I'd say I loved 85% of the game, and the other 15% bordered on annoying to being outright annoying. So that's not a bad split for such a long game. Thus it only sits right that we begin with the good stuff initially. If we're talking surface level, it is aces. OST, sound design, lighting, cinematography, graphics, animation, set pieces, all of them are faultless to me. The production values, as they were with Final Fantasy XVI that I played last year, were top tier, and I was in awe with pretty much everything that made up this beautiful game. You can talk about Square putting too many eggs in the Final Fantasy VII basket when you look at how much budget they allocate to these games, but I don't really mind when it sounds and looks as good as this. I got the impression even early on how much care and time was put into these environments. Every aspect of the world feels meticulously crafted and designed to bring the unique flavour and feel of each area to the fore. In Junon, you'll see NPCs going about their days shopping around, or differently designed bars in nooks and corners with live bands playing on stage. And then in contrast, you've got locales like the Golden Saucer, which has that theme park atmosphere nailed, whether it's from staying in your spooky hotel for the evening, or taking in the multitude of different zones in the saucer itself. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth nails aspects like this. I was consistently absorbed into this world, and it's an absolute joy to experience firsthand. As someone who has never played the original, and likely won't do so for a while, this was as good as I could have hoped for. Plus, I am happy to say that at least for me, the PC port was eons better than the one for Final Fantasy XVI. It didn't crash at all, it didn't chug memory, and it ran very smoothly at 120 FPS at 1080p. I'm glad that was the case, because games as gorgeous as Rebirth should not be held back by suboptimal ports. And if eye candy isn't enough for you to explore the areas, then you might want to do so at least for the multitude of minigames there are, and Rebirth has a lot of minigames. Now granted, not all of them are hits. I couldn't stand stuff like the sit-ups, but many I was a fan of, like the Chocobo Racing, Boxing, Fort Condor, and the best of the lot, Queen's Blood. We must get a physical version of Queen's Blood. This is one of my favourite minigames ever. It's a simple premise but really addicting, and the mechanics just build and build as the hours pass. It stays fresh right to the end of the game. I know a lot of people have connection to Triple Triad, and I did play that in Final Fantasy XIV, the MMO, but I prefer Queen's Blood. Now if you manage to pull yourself away from minigames like Queen's Blood, you'll find a big world to explore. Each zone has a bunch of markers to visit along with tie-in side quests. The exploration itself as a part of the game, I am indifferent to it. I can't help but feel I've seen this design for exploration in games like Assassin's Creed. Granted, I haven't played one of those since the second entry over a decade ago, but this whole idea of flags on the map to mark points of interest is a point that I feel sparks contention. This approach means that it's not a case of exploring per se, it's more a case of how do you get to your next destination. Maybe that feeling of discovery is diminished. Like I say, I neither love nor hate the style of exploration, but that sense of hand-holding could put a player off, especially with how much there is to find in each area. But again, a lot of care was put into this aspect. It at least has a high level of polish. Every zone is completely different to the last, the side quests are actually fairly decent all said and done, my personal favourite being the quest to save a chicken that eventually becomes dinner anyway, and the combat certainly keeps it keen. I made no secret that I was a fan of the hybrid combat in Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it's no different in Rebirth, especially with the addition of synergy skills that adds a little bit more to the palette. It's an engaging style, there's still elements of strategy there in terms of assessing the enemy, figuring out what parts to attack, staggering and limit breaks. It's a fun approach, and I've got nothing bad to say about it, along with unique play styles for each character. Some of them weren't really to my tastes in terms of gameplay, but the majority were positive. And the same holds true for the characters themselves. Pretty much every one is given a moment to shine, the backstories are fleshed out, the chemistry between the main group is excellent, and there wasn't a character I disliked, again, in the majority. I'm sure what helped here is that the English voice acting is brilliant. Every single one, including the performances for minor characters, just did a great job.
What?
Avalanche, huh?
That depends on who's asking.
A woman who could turn you in. And be 100 grand richer for it.
Well, you know what they say. Can't take it with you.
It's a testament to the presentation and writing quality that the game actually made me feel sympathy for minor characters who have maybe an hour of screen time at most, like the 7th Infantry on Junon. Those guys ruled. But, and this is a big but, I mentioned that in the majority I like these characters, yet there is one that grinded my gears, and he did so because he didn't deserve the amount of screen time he was given in Rebirth. Some of you may have guessed who it is if you've played the game yourself, but I'll throw his name out now. It's Chadley. Chadley is one of the most annoying side characters I've had the displeasure of listening to in recent memory. He gives Naviru from Monster Hunter Stories 2 a run for his money, and that is saying something. Chadley will jump in at every moment he can to give you a little morsel of information on the land, or tell his companion Mai to shut up, which is ironic because that's exactly what he should be doing, and he even has the gall to be passive-aggressive when you haven't found his precious proto-relics.
I've observed that World Intel collection is stalled of late. I'm certain, however, a veteran mercenary like you would never abandon a task. I know you must be busy, but I'd appreciate your help.
You little shit, I am trying to save the world here, your ancient cricket shin pads can wait. Not a fan of him, and come 50 hours in, it was hold Y to skip, because outside of some side quests it was pretty much always the same dialogue from this guy. Now, following on from Chadley, we're going to veer a little more into the negative aspects of Rebirth, and there's a big part that we need to talk about as we bridge over, that being the story. I'm going to make this very clear initially, I enjoyed the story of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Its actual plot and event had me on the edge of my seat on more than one occasion. There's no doubt to me that the story delivered in many situations. Yet in the same breath, there is a problem with it, and it is tied to the 15% negative aspects of Rebirth. For me, this game has one big flaw that I hope is addressed in the final entry, and that is padding. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has far more of this than I would have hoped, and unfortunately the padding eats into the pacing of the story. Now granted, some of the pacing is highly dependent on how much exploring you do. If you move from main story point to main story point, then it's undoubtedly going to be better. But Rebirth encourages exploration. It gives you a lot of tangible reasons to put your journey on hold, like the multitude of summons that are no doubt useful in later fights. And when I was filling out these zones, I was taking roughly 5 to 7 hours to do so that's a big gap in between the story. Take this moment for instance, I have to wait for these guys in cloaks to get to their destination as they slowly hobble on. Emphasis on slowly. This is very fun. To be fair though, this is optional padding. The player chooses whether they want to do the side content or proceed with the story, so it's not egregious. The issue with Rebirth, however, is that it also has forced padding. Moments within the main story that serve very little purpose other than to artificially bloat playtime. It has a habit of splitting the party up, and even has the audacity to force solo sequences on the player. The Kate Sith section 60 hours into the game was easily the worst. He was the only character who I didn't like gameplay wise, yet the game forced me to play as him solo through this monotonous section that not only takes far too long, but also insists on throwing boxes with the worst controls imaginable. And the real kicker for this is that it comes in one of the most important parts of the story, like literally the build-up of hours upon hours culminating to this moment, and it's diluted because of a meaningless padding sequence that is not fun to play. And then for added insult to injury, Kate Sith is mandatory for the following boss fight, which is one of the hardest in the main story. Speaking of bosses, that final one is too long as well. I lost count of how many phases it had, you could probably say that's padding as well. Plus, Kate Sith is mandatory there too. Square, please take the hint, I don't want to play as him. So yeah, Rebirth has issues. Like I say, 15% of it veered into the negative. No game is perfect, and Rebirth for me is no exception to that rule. Yet still, that other 85% is wonderful. And of course I'm going to focus more on that positive aspect because the game deserves it. The overwhelming majority of Rebirth is stellar. And if they just trim off some of that needless fat, because I'll be real, the game would be better off without it, if they can do that for part 3, I think Square can sign off the remake trilogy in style. The 9th game I played was Yakuza 0, played on PC, and it took me 41 hours to finish. Full video done on this already, so another TLDR here. Awesome game, starting right at the beginning of the series worked wonders for me, and I dare say I'm going to have a great time with the other games. I was a big fan of the two protagonists, Kiryu and Majima, was thoroughly impressed by the story and how it balanced these serious and humorous moments together. It has great voice acting, a deceivingly deep combat approach, music's awesome, and the minigames are some of the best around, the Cabaret Club being my personal highlights. Yeah, this is a great game. The 10th game I played was Dragon Quest VIII Journey of the Cursed King, PS2 emulated, and it took me 71 hours to finish. Once again, full video done for Dragon Quest VIII, so it's just going to be the short version here. It is really good. I can see why the game is held in the higher echelons of the series. Pretty much fit the mould of the other Dragon Quest games I've played in terms of story premise and structure, the idea that a hero fights back against the darkness, but in the same breath it really nails that feeling of adventure throughout. It's got a pleasing amount of those high fantasy elements that brings worlds like these to life, and I do think that Dragon Quest VIII excels even further because of the sense of urgency. The idea of chasing after Dual Margus and seeing his actions firsthand nails down the threat he poses, and actually gives impetus to the mission here. It's just one of those classic JRPG adventure style games that will always have a place in my backlog. I'm more than happy to play games of the same ilk as Dragon Quest VIII, especially when it executes that premise so well. The 11th game I played was Final Fantasy I Pixel Remaster, played on PC, and it took me 11 hours to finish. When I finished Dragon Quest VIII, it was about 3 days before a big game came out that I wanted to dedicate my time to. As such, I wanted to play something shorter, both as a palate cleanser from the more lengthy games I had played in a row up till that point, and also to ensure I could complete it before said game came out. And the original Final Fantasy fit that bill perfectly, especially when considering the more user-friendly Pixel Remaster variant. Now, I've mentioned a few times before, but my history with Final Fantasy is bare compared to, say, Issa Atelier. I've played a fair few of the later entries, but the older releases I am pretty much out of the loop. 1 through 8 I have yet to play, and the only version of 7 I've experienced are the 2 parts of the remake and Crisis Core. I guess you can count Advent Children as well. So yeah, I'm more of a modern Final Fantasy player. The MMO is the one I've put the most hours into till this day, that being Final Fantasy XIV, so I think it's high time I try to rectify that somewhat in between the new releases coming out in 2025. And the original Final Fantasy did give me a good time, all said and done. It's not going on my top JRPGs list coming the end of the year, of that I'm certain, but it's a game that I can appreciate, much like the original Dragon Quest. It's nice to go back and see how the series begun, how it formed the basis of later games, and at the very least I can respect the legacy despite its age. Story is as simple as it gets. 4 warriors of light venture out to stop the darkness, and they have to restore the power of the crystals by defeating the fiends who have drained them of their power. and without much more direction you're thrown into the world to carry out that mission. What I found myself appreciating about Final Fantasy though is how well crafted the adventure was. I expected to get lost several times during my playthrough, much like in the original Dragon Quest, but it only happened once around the midpoint where I had to find the airship. Otherwise it flowed smoothly, and what aided me outside of the obvious aspects like talking to NPCs was the magic system. Spells are separated into tiers for your magic users like level 1, 2, 3 and so on, and I found it acted as a good marker to determine where I should be at that point in the game. For instance, if I had just gone to a town that had level 2 spells and then happened to bump into another town soon after with level 5 spells, then I immediately knew I messed up somewhere. On the occasion I did need to backtrack though, the additions to the Pixel Remaster were just what the doctor ordered. No doubt the feature that allowed for random encounters to be turned off was a godsend here. In the cases where I was just searching for my next objective, which meant I was backtracking a lot, having this option at the push of a button was welcome. Fighting enemies is fine, but fighting enemies that offer little reward is just tedious, so I'm glad it's there. There was also a boost option for experience and gil. If you so wanted, you can multiply the rewards of each by 2 times or 4 times the standard amount, and you could even lower the rewards if you prefer a challenge. Me, I just left it at the original rate. I didn't really see a need to tamper with it since the game wasn't that grindy anyway, but again, it's a nice feature to have even if not used. The only time I say that I was contemplating using it was right at the end for the final boss. By far and away the hardest fight in the game, and it's not even close. I thought I was underleveled here, but I did manage to get him down on my first try, barely. Granted, my understanding of the buffs and how they stacked was limited. If I read up on this beforehand, I dare say I would have had an easier time of it. In reality though, I didn't need to except for the final fight. The rest of the game was quite simple. It had the odd challenging aspect here and there, but it never stressed me out in the same vein as say Shin Megami Tensei would. Overall thoughts, it's a good game. The original Final Fantasy still holds up in many ways, and like I say, I needed a palate cleanser like this. Of course, concessions have to be given due to its age, but it has a fair amount of fundamentals down. It's a short, by-the-numbers, turn-based JRPG that gave me a few hours of fun, which is all I needed from it. The 12th game I played was Atelier Yumiya, The Alchemist of Memories, and The Envisioned Land. It was played on PC and took me 72 hours to finish. Man oh man, the dichotomy of this game. Full video done on it, so you can check that out if you want a more in-depth take. But in short, it is absolutely brilliant in some respects, but frustrating in others. The exploration is stellar, the alchemy is fun, though admittedly easy to break, and the combat is enjoyable, if not curtailed in challenge because I crafted too much. But that is Atelier through and through. The games are all about the crafting anyway, so becoming overpowered due to that is never an issue. On the other side, it has some mechanics that are either poorly implemented, like the building, or some that make no sense whatsoever, like camping. In addition, the PC port, as of the time of writing, had a surprising amount of technical flaws, along with 8 hard crashes to compound it further. It is an amazing game, and I do recommend it for a purchase, though for the PC port at least I'd wait for a few patches to come out to sort out the technical flaws. The 13th game I played was the first of the Suikoden HD remasters played on PC, and it took me 13 hours to finish. For the longest time I have been on the outside looking in. It's not too difficult to hear about the legacy of Suikoden when making videos centered on JRPGs. And with Konami releasing the bundle for the first 2 games on modern platforms, there was never a better time to jump in than right now. Initially, yes, I am aware that Suikoden 2 is considered the better of the pair based on majority opinion, but there's no way that I was just going to ignore the first game. I wanted to start there and then make my way over to 2 when the time was right. And yes, it is somewhat retro and old school in facets, but it's still a good game even now. I will say that I had a fun time with this game, even with the odd issue during my playthrough. Suikoden 1 is centered around a self-insert protag who is the son of a famed imperial general. Said general must quell a rebellion up north, leaving his son to serve the emperor more directly. The story soon develops into a quest surrounding one of the 27 great runes that is held by the protagonist, which later requires the aid of many allies to aid his endeavour. In order to do this, the protagonist makes his way around the land finding said allies in towns, or aiding them by solving a specific problem, gradually building up his army over time. There's no doubt that there's a great sense of progression in Suikoden 1. The core premise of the game is just addictive, much like Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes was last year, the spiritual successor. The whole idea of building up an army and seeing the reward for that effort is undoubtedly rewarding, and recruiting some of these allies is a puzzle in of itself. Some are extremely simple, while others will need a combination of characters in your party when you interact with them, or a specific sequence of events to be accomplished first before they are made available. Much of it is worthwhile. For instance, being able to upgrade your weapons to their max level can only be done by recruiting a set of 5 characters, the final one only unlockable if you find the other 4. The map is a feature that is locked behind an optional recruitable character, and various shops in your castle will also be filled by the allies you find. There's clear incentive to go out into the world and explore every corner of a town or dungeon. In some cases you may even want to revisit them after the story progresses. Said story is also fairly good. It's a bit primitive by today's standards. Certain developments aren't given much time to build up into something meaningful despite clearly being a key moment, but it gets the job done even with some silly developments like an arc surrounding a vampire that comes out of nowhere. Still, it is good, and no doubt was consolidated further by the one-on-one duels or the army battles, mechanically not the deepest as they come down to a rock paper scissors affair, but fitting in terms of what Suikoden 1 was all about. And no doubt what kept the game ticking over were the vast array of characters that join through said narrative. Suikoden 1 places a lot of stock on customization. It will often shake your team around with mandatory characters for certain parts of the story, and it's clear that you're attempting to find the most effective members in your vast army. It helps that any character that is below the others in level will gain experience rapidly, so you don't need to worry about them bringing the team down after a couple of fights. Said battle system is a turn-based affair, 6 in a group at a time, and it's decent enough. I do appreciate that there is an auto-battle feature and a fast-forward option in this remaster. I have no doubt that it would get tiresome putting in commands for the easier fights, but there were plenty of moments where I had to take full control, especially for the bosses. Having the optimal balance of damage, buffs, and indeed healing was the key to success, and that's made even better with the use of the runes, which you can equip to each character, which grant anything from special moves to a wide array of spells. Though equipping said runes, or indeed equipment, is where my biggest issue lies. Inventory management is, for lack of a better word, a chore. You've got a massive amount of playable characters here, and you'll need to kit out a fair number of them. Each character has a limited inventory for their own equipment and treasures they find, plus you have a storehouse back at the castle. The issue for me is that it's cumbersome. Let's say I want to fully equip a new character in my party. I go to my storehouse and find that equipment, but the main obstacle is that I do not know what items said character can equip, nor do I know what slot they fit into. Now granted, chestplate or half-plate helm are self-explanatory, but others like the fur cloak have me wondering if it's an accessory or equipable to the body. This storehouse menu did not give me that information. The only way I could find out was to take it out of the storehouse in bulk and then go back into the equipment menu to see what would stick. Doing that after every main story juncture became tedious, and I feel like this should have been a focus for the remaster. The autosave feature isn't much better either. It saved at the most random spots, like right at the start of the dungeon, but not at the end of it, and as such was quite unreliable. I quickly realised that manual saving was the way forward whenever possible, something that could only be done at an inn or one of these orbs. So yes, I did have issues with the first Suikoden, but nowhere near enough for me to write it off as a bygone relic. Like I say, I think it's a good game. I don't think it's aged as well as contemporaries like Chrono Trigger for instance, but it has a good foundation to it, and that foundation is still enjoyable nearly 30 years later. The 14th game I played was Kai no Kiseki, or Trails Beyond the Horizon, played on PC, and it took me 83 hours to finish. It was fate. A day or two after I finished my own playthrough of Kai, the official English release of the game was announced that same Friday. That's great news, because this game is not only the best of the Calvard arc, it is one of the best of the series and easily goes in my personal top 4. Kai no Kiseki was exactly what the Calvard arc needed, a game that demonstrated the special place that Trails has as a JRPG franchise. It brings in many of the elements that the series excels in, like the world building, the long running and deep story, and the memorable character moments. But it has a story better than Daybreak 1, and better character events than Daybreak 2, along with having the best gameplay of the three with the additions to both field mode and command mode. Add on the visual and cinematic improvements as well, and Kai no Kiseki ends up being the best of the arc, without question. I am very confident in this game. I expect it's going to end up in many fans' top 5 when it eventually comes out in the West as Trails Beyond the Horizon. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe for more JRPG content, and consider joining my Patreon if you're interested. Peace.